Guys, y'all sounded good. I appreciate that. The rest of you did as well, especially for probably not ever hearing that song before. It's not something on the Christian radio, but it was made especially for the summer camp they had last year, made by 16 cities. But you can, it was great. We'll do it again. Exodus. I told you Wednesday night, I believe, we're going to take a brief retreat from the Gospel of John. We'll come back to it in a few weeks, maybe a couple of months or something, or just after a while we'll come back to that. But right now we're going to look at a few names of God. The name we're going to look at today is I Am, and we'll come back to it tonight as well. We're going to look at the power of the names of God. And here in Exodus, He is going to give Himself, He's going to display Himself a new name, and it's really an invitation to service is what this name I Am is and how He uses it with Moses. Now let me ask you, we were talking, Jimmy was saying in the great Sunday school class that we have most every Sunday, and you need to be in class. You can come to our class. If you don't have a regular one, you attend. But he was talking about how they went to a friend's house this past week, and they sat around a fire. And they said it was great just to sit around this fireplace outdoors and just to watch the fire. And it is. Most people enjoy a bonfire. Most people enjoy a cookout. You like the smell. I like the smell of the wood burning. I like the smell of a fire. Now, we get home and we don't necessarily like it on our clothes and in our hair and just on our skin for the next day or so. But generally, we like to be around a fire. Fire brings warmth. It brings comfort. They're fascinating to watch how a fire can just, the blaze, the flames can just hop around. It'll be burning in one spot and then it'll move to another spot. And the smoke that is blown around, how the wood just disintegrates before us as we watch it. It's just something fascinating to watch, and it's interesting. It draws people to it. Well, there's been some great fires in history as well. You've probably sung the song, London Bridge is falling down. Well, in 1666, there was a fire in London that burned for 4 days. It burned 3/4 of that city down in 1666. Another great fire on October the 8th, 1871. You know about this one. After a hot, dry spell through the summer and into fall, Patrick and Catherine O'Leary's cow kicked over the lantern that became the Great Chicago Fire. Hundreds of people were killed in it. 17,500 homes were destroyed and left the city devastated. Well, there's even a fire that was bigger than that. In San Francisco on April the 8th, 1906. You're familiar with the great San Francisco earthquake. After that earthquake, it left the city with the water hydrants, the underground water mains busted. There was no way to put out the fire that ensued after that earthquake, and it burned for days, and they began to start dynamiting the city in hopes of stopping the fire. After it was all said and done, it burned up over 300,000 homes and businesses. You couldn't even put a number on what it would cost to rebuild that then or today. But all of those fires, any great fire through history, doesn't match up to one simple small bush burning in a wilderness that never burned up. And that's where we are with Exodus chapter 3, verse 2. This fire, this bush that was burning was seen by one man. His name was Moses. Verse 2 says this: the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of the bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush was burning. I'm sorry, I went to verse 2, didn't I? So Moses said, hang on, it is verse 2. I'll get it right here in a minute. You just get to Exodus, okay? Exodus chapter 3. Let me read it from up here. Maybe I can follow along. The angel of the Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with the fire, yet the bush was not burned up. So Moses is the one keep your finger there in Exodus and turn to Acts chapter 7, and we're going to look at a couple of verses there. Moses is the one who sees this bush. God comes to him, calls out to him in the midst of this fire. Moses is out there in the wilderness tending some flocks, and we'll find out a little bit more about that. But Moses is a fascinating figure. But keep your finger in Exodus and look at Acts chapter 7, verse 22. Moses, he's a fascinating fellow. He was educated in all the learning of the Egyptians. And he was a man of power in words and deeds. Now, the fact that he was a man, it was an educated man. He was a man in words and deeds. That would mean that he was taught as the Egyptians. Who raised Moses? He was raised to be under Pharaoh's household. He was raised to be a Pharaoh. He was raised with the best of everything. He was a blessed man. He had everything at his disposal. The whole entire country, really the most powerful most powerful country at that time, in control of the world, was at his disposal. So he would have been educated in architecture, astronomy. He would have been educated in mathematics. And then it goes on and says, not only that, but he was a man who was powerful in deeds. Well, in deeds would have meant he was trained in military. He would have been a great general, a great military advisor. He would have been taught at a West Point of that time. He knew military. He knew how to get around in that situation. Well, Moses is very well known. Very well known in Egypt and the country. The people knew who he was. He was successful in everything he did. For mainly the first 40 years of his life. Continue on with verse 23 and 24 in Acts 7. But when he was approaching the age of 40, it entered his mind to visit his brethren, the son of Israel. And when he saw one of them being treated unjustly, he defended him and took vengeance for the oppressed by striking down the Egyptian. So, you know the story of Moses. You know that he sees one of his fellow men, his fellow Hebrew men that's being struck down, that is being beaten. And what does Moses do? Moses goes over and kills the Egyptian and tries to hide him. So we're familiar with that. He kills the Egyptian and then he flees. Well, Moses, for the first 40 years, well-known, successful, educated, had the country at his fingertips, at his disposal. The next 40 years, Moses spends his life fleeing. He's running. He's in exile. He's fled to a place called Midian, and that's where he is now. And while he's in Midian for the next 40 years, God reveals himself to him and reveals this name, I Am, and invites Moses to serve him. God's revelation of his name is an invitation for Moses to be his man in that day, in that time, and to join God with what he's doing. Now, when Jesus invited you, when Jesus called you, when Jesus spoke to you, it wasn't for salvation only. Yes, that's the biggest part of it. Salvation, yes. Jesus calls your name. The Spirit woos you. The Spirit pulls on you, and you respond to that, and you give your life. You accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. You admit that I'm lost without Him, that I must have Him in my life. I must make this public profession of who He is, that He's God's Son, that He died on the cross for me, that He is greater than any other thing in this world or beyond this world. But when He called you, it wasn't just for salvation only and then for you to spend the rest of your life in a lazy boy with your feet kicked back and not doing anything. He called you to a life of serving Him as well, in the body, outside the body, in the world. So that's what God is doing here. God is calling Moses to a life of service as well. Now back in Exodus chapter 3, verse 3 and 4. So Moses said, remember, he's just been exposed to the bush. He sees the bush. It's not consumed. Moses says, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to look, God called to him. Now here's the first thing. When you turn, God speaks. You need to write that down. You need to remember that. When you turn, God speaks. 2 times here it says Moses turned aside. Now in the Hebrew, that means you were going in one direction, but you turned and went another direction. You changed course. You plotted a different route. That's what Moses does. Where has Moses been for 40 years now? He has been running. He has been fleeing. He has let somebody give him maybe a false identity, a false name. He's been living under somebody else's household, somebody else's care. Now what's happening? He's been fleeing. God calls to him. He's on a course. He's plotted a route. God calls and he changes direction. When he sees that, when he sees this, he changes direction and God speaks to him. When you turn, God speaks. So Moses comes to this place in verse 3. He says, I must turn aside. I must change direction. I must plot a different course in my life because what I have done up to this point is not cutting it. I am not succeeding. I'm living under this pressure, this stress, this anxiety in my life for one reason or the other. I must change course in my life. When Moses declares that, he hears. When he changes direction, he hears God speak. So when you turn, when you change direction, you can hear God speak. Now maybe some of you have done that in your life, or maybe you want to do that in your life. Maybe some of you say, I'd like to go back to school. I'd like to finish my degree. I'd like to get a degree. I'd like to change professions. I'd like to get a new job. I would like to change where I live. I would like to change some of my habits that I have. Now maybe that's you. Maybe you've already made a change like that in your life. Maybe you want to change. Maybe you might need a change of the influencers, the things that dictate, that drive you. Maybe you need to change some of those in your life. Maybe you need to change what you read. Maybe you need to change what you watch. Maybe you need to change what you listen to. Maybe you need to change some of your friends so you can live more like Christ. So you need a change in your life and you're wondering, God, I can't hear you. God, I don't sense you. Where are you, God? You need to reach a point in your life where you realize, where you ask, am I following God's will for me, or am I chasing something else in my life? Ask yourself that. Am I following God's will for my life, or am I chasing something that I can never attain in my life? Verse 4. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. Now you see, when Moses determined to look, when he determined to go to this bush, to turn around and look, what does he hear then? He hears God speak. What are you so focused on that has got you off of hearing God? God had not been calling Moses before this. Moses was on his own. He was doing his own thing for 40 years. Now Moses could have walked right on by that bush. What a crazy sight. That's just the craziest thing I've ever seen. Maybe it was a meteor that fell. Maybe it just spontaneously combusted or something like that. Moses could have gave any number of excuses for that thing to be on fire. But no, Moses changes direction and looks at it and goes, and then God speaks to him. God had not been speaking to him up to this point. They had not been texting each other. They had not been FaceTiming each other. They had not been Snapchatting, whatever that is. They had not been going and writing in the sand little notes for each other to communicate. But when Moses changes direction in his life, then God speaks to him. God was already there. God was in that place awaiting Moses to respond. Moses finally determined, in my life, I'm going to change course. And when he determines that, he hears God speak to Him. Now we sit around and think, and we've all said this, man, I just wish there was a burning bush in my life. I just wish I had this burning bush and I could hear God speak and that He would come to me in that bush and I would know for sure that that was Him in my life and He would speak to me. And we think, man, if He would just speak, it would all be different. Well, let me ask you, has there been something big happen in your life? Has there been some kind of catastrophe? Has there been some kind of something wrong in your life, something that has happened devastating in your life, maybe that you caused it? Do you think that possibly God was trying to speak to you up until that point to warn you, to caution you that if you don't change your direction, something bad is going to happen? Look, it doesn't matter. What's that big bank in Benton, CFSB? Is that right? No. Yes. So it doesn't matter if you stood out there in front of CFSB and watched it burn. God doesn't have to have that to speak to you through that. You could stand there and watch that thing burn all day. It doesn't matter if there were 1,000 little bushes that came along all across your path and were burning. If you haven't changed direction, if you haven't looked and listened for God to speak, you're going to miss it. So Moses, he sees the bush, and in the midst of the bush, God comes to him and speaks to him. The fact is, we have had warning signs all through our life, all through our days. We have had burning bushes around us and before us, but we've probably ignored them all. How do we ignore burning bushes in our life? We just continue on our same course, on the same path that we've plotted. That can't be for me. That's got to be for somebody else. That's somebody else's problem. Can you believe how they live their life? Look at how they live their life. I can't believe they live like that. That's their bush. But we have had these warning signs, these burning bushes in our life, but yet we will not change course. And what do we say? I can fix it myself. I can take care of this. I don't need anybody's help. I don't need another brother or sister in Christ to come alongside me and to go through this issue with me, to support me, to help me in this. I can fix it myself. God is speaking. We just need to turn. The rest of 4. When Moses saw and he turned to look, then God called out to him. Now this is the great part right here. God calls out to him from the midst of the bush and says, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. God called. He calls out Moses' name. This is the good part. Moses has got a past. Moses has got a history. But God calls out his name. He doesn't say. God doesn't have his burning bush going right there. He doesn't have his little campfire going and people are gathered around. He didn't say, hey buddy, you. He didn't say, hey you. I've been waiting for somebody to walk by. Can you come over here? He doesn't say, hey you over there. Hey buddy, hey friend, hey chap. Hey good old boy. He doesn't say, I've been out here for years now and I've been waiting for somebody to cross by so I could talk to them. He calls Moses by his name. Now the fact that he did that shows that I know who you are. And like I said, Moses has a past. Moses had failures. Moses had shortcomings. He had ill feelings. He had a past. When you decide in your life that I'm going to turn and I'm going to go a different direction in my life and I can hear God, God will call you by name. And that's the good thing, that He does call you by name, because you have a past as well. We often let our past get the best of us. We often let our past determine our present and our future. We live our past out daily. But God calls a person that has a past. You too have a past. You have shortcomings. You have failures. You have a history. You have flaws, you have inadequacies, you have sin in your life, you have mess-ups, but yet God still loves you in the midst of every bit of it. And that's what He shows by identifying Moses as not just, hey buddy, not just, hey pal, but Moses. Moses. Todd, your name. He calls to you by name. Moses had been running for 40 years to get away from his past. Have you been running for 40 years today to get away from something in your closet? Have you been running for 4 days to get away from something in your closet? Have you been running since last night to get away from something? Let me tell you, God already knows. Your closet is illuminated. God already knows it. You just might as well confess it and repent from it and then decide to change course and listen to God direct you in your life. Verse 5. Then He says, "Do not come here. Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." Now, to remove sandals meant that you were a servant. Servants usually didn't have sandals. God is telling him, remove your sandals. And Moses, when Moses submits, God reveals. And that's the second thing. When you submit, God reveals. Moses is going to submit now. And God is going to reveal. You need to take off your sandals. After 40 years of running, how long does it take you? After 40 years of running, Moses is ready to submit. How many times do you have to go to the bottom before you say, I give up, God? How many times does it take for you to fall flat on your face before you say, I give up, I really can't do it on my own, I really do need help? How many? Moses has ran for 40. Moses comes to the point in his life, he realizes, well, you know, I was educated, the best teachers of the day, that's not going to save me now. Maybe you think a degree on your wall, or a title after your name, or some letters, an abbreviation after your name or before your name might save you. Moses says, you know what, that's not going to save me. For 40 years that hadn't helped me. My military experience hasn't helped me. That knowledge I had hasn't helped me. The job that I had, the family that I had, my mom, she can't help me. My father, he can't help me. The king, the president, it doesn't matter who you are. When Moses submits, when you submit, God reveals, God delivers. Now, he says, still in verse 4, when the Lord saw that, He turned aside to look. God called him from the midst, and Moses answers, "Here I am. Here I am." Now, Moses is going to back off of that in just a few verses. But at this moment right now, and we'll see this tonight, how Moses begins to backtrack. It's amazing how when we do hit bottom and we finally want to give up and we finally want to give in and we finally want God to reveal Himself to us, that when God starts nudging us, starts giving us direction, we start saying, hold on now, God, let's just back off of this just a little bit now. You got me back on my feet, and I appreciate you for that. But I'll take it from here. God, I really don't want to commit. You wanted my whole life. You wanted my finances too. You wanted me to submit to you in all areas of my life. Now, God, that's just a little overextending yourself. Let's just ratchet it down just a little bit, God. Let's just don't get too ambitious with this whole surrender my life thing to you. And that's where we are. That's where we get. And what happens? We begin to take those reins back from God. God, you know what? I really can do this by myself. I'm really okay at this by myself. And then we're right back on that course that we had originally plotted and drifting further and further away. God hasn't moved. Who's the one that moved in all of that? It was us. It was us that moved. So Moses comes now. He wants to submit. He's going to submit himself. He's going to take off his sandals because he realizes that I am in a predicament and I am in a mess, and for 40 years I've been out here and I've got this awful sunburn from walking in this desert, and I'm sick and tired. I'm ready to get underneath a palm tree or something. He's ready to kick back. He's ready to find some refreshment because this is not getting it. So he says, here I am. That's what a servant would say. Here I am. Isaiah said it. Samuel said it. Moses says it. Can you say it? Can you say to God, here I am. I'm ready. I'll be your servant. I'll be your man. I'll be your woman. I'll be your youth. I'll be your child. I'll be your servant in that school. Are you ready to say, I'll be your servant. I'll be the person you need me to be in that class, in college, at my job site. Even though it's not, I'll be that person you call me to be in the family that doesn't want to have anything to do with Christ. I'll be that mouthpiece. I'll live my life to a higher standard. I'll be that person at Walmart who doesn't get upset when the line is backed up because they only have like 2 cash registers open. You been there? Yeah. And you say, I just wanted a candy bar. That's all I wanted was a candy bar. I'll be that person who when they get cut off at the traffic, at the interstate, at the exit ramp, doesn't fly off in a fit of rage. God, I'll be your man, woman, youth, child, wherever you place me in this world. Can you say that for yourself today? Here I am. I'll serve. I'll serve you. Maybe you haven't even, at this point in your life, been able to say, here I am for salvation in your life. And you're ready to say that I've fallen on my face enough. I'm tired of failing, that I need you to direct my life. That I need you for my eternal forgiveness. That I need you to forgive my sin. Are you ready to say, here I am? Here I am. He is calling you. It's not happen chance that you're here today. There is a reason for you to be here. There is a reason for you to be in Sunday school, to be in the service every week. God has a word for you. You know what happens? You know what happens when you don't come to Sunday school? What happens when you don't come to church? The Sunday school teacher brings a message, a lesson every week. Some weeks we get further into it than others. Some weeks we may not even... Now with Jimmy we do. Jimmy has to get through all verses. But sometimes maybe you don't even get to the first verse and you just share life with each other. You don't come to Sunday school. The Sunday school teacher, the classmates, they can't help you. They can't be there for you because they don't know what's going on. You know what happens when you don't come to worship service at 10:30? I've spent all week preparing a message, but when you don't come to the service, the Word can't help you. It can't help you. I know you got things, sometimes things come up. Sometimes you get sick. Have a vacation or something like that. But you need to be in service. You need to be in church. You need to be in Sunday school. You need to be in a Bible study or with a small group of people that can help you along in your life. Because when you neglect those things, you're going to find that you're off in that wilderness for the next 40 years thinking, I can do it on my own. So let me ask you, how you been doing on your own? You've been doing pretty good, haven't you? On your own, how far have you gotten? Moses comes to the place and he says, I'm ready to serve. Here I am. Are you ready to say, here I am? Here I am with my life, God. I need to confess it. I need to turn it over to you. Here I am with the rest of my life. I want you to lead me. Moses says, here I am. He was waiting. God was there. He's here. Your current condition doesn't have to determine your future. Do you like where you are today? Are you in a pickle? You in a bind? Struggle in your life? Your current condition does not have to determine your future. Here I am, God. I'm ready for a new course. Let's pray.